Hello, everybody. Hope you're doing all right this afternoon. It's like the lighting's a little weird, so sun's shining through the window pretty good there. So yeah, you probably can't see if I do that. So, all right, we're on Unit 36, Session 2. So Unit 36, Session 2. This is, if you will, week 2 of 4 of our little mini series in Revelation to cap off our study in the Gospel project, and we'll start in Genesis next month. So. Just a beautiful part of the scriptures is just because we finished the book doesn't mean that we are finished with the book, right? It just grows and it deepens the more we know Jesus. And so our passage is Revelation 3, verses 14 through 22, I believe. I believe that's it. But obviously the correct scripture, if that's wrong, will be in our in your notes. But I love this passage. I love it, and at the same time, I hate it because it is so convicting, right? So this is the words that Jesus spoke to the church of Laodicea, and so there's 7 churches that this was originally addressed to, and he addresses each church, and he several of which there's issues at those churches. Some of them actually they're great, but the church at Laodicea is probably the most relatable because we find ourselves in that position a lot as Christians. We seem to oftentimes live in this gap, if you will, between a fire for Jesus and just complete, like, no relationship with Jesus. So if you think about it, you've got 3 types of people. You've got the person that doesn't put their trust in Jesus and is lost. You got the person that has put their trust in Jesus, but hasn't necessarily been living for him or isn't very strong in their faith. And then you've got the sold out believer, right? And many of us far too often fall into that second category of we're saved and we're believers, but we find ourselves sort of lukewarm and sort of in this gap between where we're supposed to be and who God saved us to be. But obviously we are still saved. So just a couple of things about this. We have to remember, as the author's talking here, like Jesus is quoting, or John is quoting what Jesus said. And so this is like he literally like describes himself as the originator of creation, right? The true and the faithful witness. And so right then and there, you realize that this is the one, this is the person that is able to judge. This is the one that should judge. He reminds us of that because as the creator, he has the right to do so. And I would even say the obligation to judge his people. And so with this, we see that he says that they're neither hot nor cold, and that instead they're lukewarm, and he'd rather spit them out of his mouth, right? This almost makes him want to vomit, right? And it's this picture of, look, I'd rather you be on either one of 2 things, on fire for me or away from me, because at least if you're away from me, then the world isn't confusing the fact of whether you're for me or not. I think is the heart of what he's getting at there. And think about that as us. Like, so often we let our testimony of who Christ is be shaped by who we are. And so often we don't live lives that are on fire, and we don't live lives that are evident of the Spirit of God within us. We live these lukewarm lives at times, where we just feel like we're stuck in this gap, right, between where we used to be, but where we're supposed to be, you know. And so Jesus saw their condition, and he says, "I'd rather vomit you up," right? And so you think like the passage is going to end badly, but what he says in I believe it's verse 18, he says, "I stand at the door and knock," right? Just think about that for a second. He says he stands at the door and knocks, realizing that, like, if Jesus wanted to, he could just bust down the door and destroy us. But he stands at the door and knocks. And I think that's his act of love for us. Even though we disappoint him, even though there's actions in which we do many times, or the things that we don't do that just make us feel lukewarm, right? It's neither hot or cold, right? If we eat our food, we usually like it hot or like it cold. But if it's room temperature, it's really not that good. And so that's kind of the picture that Jesus gives us there. Despite all that, he still loves us and wants us to be in relationship with him. And he's a good God, right? And he loves us. And I'd say this just to close, like, the enemy's greatest weapon at times is spiritual complacency, right? Like if you're a Christian, but you're not really like pursuing him that deeply or telling others about him, you're really that much of a threat to the enemy. But when we're on fire for Jesus, when we're walking with him, when we're following him in obedience, that is an act of war, according to the enemy. And so, in many ways, spiritual warfare is good because it lets us know that we're doing something that the devil doesn't like, right? And we're doing something that ultimately pleases God. And if it pleases God, it actually absolutely despises Satan. And so, just think about that this week as we're planning. Um, think about where you are and where you want your students to be, and ask yourself the question, like, are you lukewarm right now? I know many times in my life I am, right? And so Jesus says pretty clearly what he thinks about that. But the same God that says that he wishes he could vomit us out because of how distasteful we are to him is the same God that stands at the door and knocks, patiently waiting for us to open ourselves up to him. So I hope that's helpful for you guys this week. Thank you guys, and we'll see you on Sunday.